In a new sit-down interview with Tucker Carlson, RFK Jr. broke down how U.S. funding of bioweapons development overseas actually works. Let's listen.
Now, when you do bioweapons development, every bioweapon needs a vaccine. So you develop them side by side. Because in 100% of the cases, when you deploy a bioweapon, there's blowback. Your side also gets sick. So in order to deploy one offensively, you need a vaccine to counter it. So you need to vaccinate your team before you deploy it. So those two things are developed through a field of science called gain of function science, where you take an infectious microbe and you amplify its infectivity, or you make it jump species, so it may kill monkeys, now you make it kill humans. And you adopt it that way, and there's all kinds of methods, and then you make it immune to antibiotics and to therapeutic drugs and to other therapies. So it's actually the inverse of medicine. For 2,800 years since Hippocrates, doctors have been trying to figure out how to make microbes less infectious and less deadly, and developed antibiotics and therapeutics to do that. Well, the guys who are involved in this, there's 36,000 what are called life scientists, but they're actually death scientists, who are now employed full-time in developing, microbes that can be used to kill people.
The claim that Ukraine has U.S. biolabs has been denounced as a conspiracy theory. There have been people that push back against this, saying that...
Yes, including me on this show.
That America has admitted to running some biolabs. It's not the same thing as doing biowarfare in the same way.
I did a radar on this a year ago, maybe more. And I looked into it because at the time Tulsi Gabbard was talking about this, and Senator Mitt Romney said it was a treasonous lie, which he was saying,
right.
And Whoopi Goldberg said that they used to arrest people for doing that. There were literal calls to jail her for talking about Ukrainian biolabs, and there was all these fact checks. And then you looked more closely. Look, I don't know the exact situation on the ground there. It sounds what RFK Jr. was describing in that clip sounds to me like something that could be done. Again, a theoretical, not necessarily what is being done. But there are laboratories in Ukraine that have pathogens that maybe they're inert and no longer infectious. But the person who told the New York Times about this was Robert Pope, director of the Pentagon's Cooperative Threat Reduction Program. He said there's no place that still has any of the sort of infrastructure for researching or producing biological weapons. Then he said, scientists being scientists, it wouldn't surprise me if some of these strains collections in some of these laboratories still have pathogen strains that go all the way back to the origins of the program.
Yeah,
scientists being scientists, that's when alarm bells go off for me. Scientists being scientists might be the whole reason we're in this little COVID problem in the first place.
The whole point is that you're not doing proper oversight and regulation, and they're not following the rules that have already been put into place.
Yeah.
So
in Eastern Europe, in what was very recently basically a third world country?
Yeah, there are all of these kind of non-fact checks.
Yeah.
Well, they'll make a big to-do of writing a bunch of words that basically admit and acknowledge the underlying point. They concede it, but then say, well, there's this distinction here that makes the original claim wrong. So fact check negative. There's a lot of that. And so again, the fact that it's possible doesn't mean that there's actual bioweapons being produced, of course. And
right.
RFK Jr. isn't talking specifically, he's talking abstractly about what is possible.
The facilities do exist,
developed.
And they did biological research on pathogens there. Victoria Nuland, remember her? She confirmed that to Senator Marco Rubio at that Senate Foreign Relations Committee meeting. Again,
she's the Forrest Gump of terrible things happening in the world. She's always there.
So that part is real. Again, maybe nothing so dangerous or wild is going on, but forgive me for not just credulously accepting on blind faith everything that I've been told by the Defense Department and the top U.S. scientists that, we weren't up to no good. It's all fine. Don't worry about it.
Especially since this was one of the stories that Facebook engaged with as part of its kind of censorship campaign and was suppressing any discussion of this particular issue. Well, Kennedy also brought up what he said was collusion between elite media to lie to the American people about the war in Ukraine. Let's take a listen.
And when it comes to the Ukraine war, we're being lied to about it.
In what way?
Well, we were lied to from the beginning. We had this comic book depiction that which we see on every war. There's a bad guy who's like, unspeakably evil.
Yes.
Who's planning world conquest or a terrorist attack on on America. And we have to be the good guys and go in and stop it. And, the background of the Ukraine war is much more complex than that. The U.S. has been involved, and particularly the neocons in the White House. I wouldn't say particularly, I'd say a group of people that are known as neocons since 2001 have been talking about putting NATO in Ukraine.
Yeah. When he's on this beat, RFK Jr., I think, reminds people why they were interested in his campaign in the first place, because there is a significant portion of the American electorate who is frustrated with the war in Ukraine, the apparently limitless spending that can be applied there, especially in the context of any number of domestic disasters like East Palestine and now most recently the Maui fires, where people are contrasting the 12 billion. 12, it can't be billion. Well, whatever the amount of money is that's been designated to Maui is dwarfed by the amount of money that's sent to Ukraine in just the most recent package. And Biden trying to
they
attach
get another $20 billion, another $50 billion every couple of weeks.
Right, and they're attaching the Maui aid to this new request for Ukrainian aid, which seems to be really highlighting the contrast between how much willingness there is for foreign aid versus domestic. So this is his sweet spot. I'm not sure why he's gone on some of these other frolics and detours of late. But, what do you make of this? Is that going to be his kind of giving voice to the portion of the electorate that is frustrated with America's unwillingness to justify why it's involved in this particular engagement and not any others around the world, that it's a proxy war and a continuation of a Cold War with a nuclear power as opposed to this kind of humanitarian effort as it's being framed? Is that going to be enough to get him to regain some of the voter share that he's lost in recent weeks?
I mean, he's absolutely correct to point out how a failed U.S. foreign policy for the last 20 years has led to this moment where Russia invaded Ukraine. That is not to let Russia off from being, Vladimir Putin off from being blamed for having done this horrible anti-humanitarian, disastrous thing. And RFK Jr. doesn't shy away from saying that when asked about it. So I think I like how he actually discusses Ukraine and gives the proper context, but saying this is very bad and this is Putin's fault, but we can't overlook the foreign policy mistakes we made that from the Democratic, Republican administrations, the Clinton, Bush, Obama, et cetera, all made to get us to this point. And I think that is a message that resonates with certainly some people, frustrated Americans who are, both right and left, both Democratic and Republican, who are always out of step with, or rather the establishment is out of step with them. The neoconservative continuation of governance in our kind of foreign policy making sector in the federal government has just long been invested in nation building and invasion and restructuring and involvement in a way that the American people were never as sold on. There was a moment of the post 9/11 kind of patriotic fervor where there was some buy-in that we should do this, but the American people, in their wisdom, saw that this was a fool's errand, that what we were doing in Iraq and Afghanistan was a fool's errand long before anyone in power in either party admitted it.
Yeah. Well, in other RFK Jr. news, just to get it in here, it is notable that we played a clip yesterday of him, I believe, in Iowa, and he made reference to the debate that was supposed to happen between him and Max Blumenthal about Israel-Palestine. He seemed to indicate during that clip that we played that debate was back on. Max Blumenthal took to Twitter yesterday explaining that he has not heard anything about that, saying at the Iowa State Fair, Robert Kennedy Jr. told reporters he's debating me on Israel-Palestine, quote, in a few weeks. I've heard nothing from him or his team about these plans, and his comms director previously told me it's not happening. Hopefully they'll clarify it soon. So hopefully we will get some more on that particular issue as well. More Rising for you right after this.